Please, just let my mom rest in peace.
Sure. Unless... For $50,000, I pretended to be another woman and took care of her blind alpha fiancé for 2 years. I fed him when the pain made his hands shake too hard to hold a spoon. I cleaned his wounds when the silver toxin flared and his veins turned black under the skin. I held him through nights so dark that even his wolf could only whimper, low and broken, somewhere deep inside his chest. And when his eyes finally opened, I was dragged out the back door before he could see my face. Now I was sitting in the back row of an Ashford Group interview with a press badge clipped to my collar and a smile that didn't reach my eyes. Dominic Ashford, CEO of Ashford Group, heir to the largest pack on the East Coast. The man who had lost his sight, lost his rank, and clawed every bit of it back. Beside him sat Vivian Blake, her hand resting on his arm like she owned him.
Mrs. Blake, the whole country has been waiting. Is the wedding finally happening?
The host leaned in with a grin. Vivian laughed, soft and practiced, then raised her left hand. On her ring finger sat a thin gold-plated band. No diamond, no family crest, just a tiny crescent moon carved into the inner rim. My stomach dropped through the floor. I bought that ring. I worked 2 double shifts at a diner to afford a matching pair. I slid one onto Dominic's finger on a night he could not see, and told him I had found it on the street because I was too embarrassed to admit I had spent my last paycheck on it. Vivian was wearing my half. Then she looked into the camera and said,
"We're getting married this fall."
Beside me, Harris leaned closer and lowered his voice.
"You know, rookie, from this angle, you actually look a little like Mrs. Blake."
Of course I did. Vivian Blake was my sister. Before the interview, the room was buzzing. Everyone knew the story. The Ashford heir, struck down by silver toxin, blinded, stripped of his rank while pack rivals circled. And his fiancée Vivian Blake, the one who stayed. Who held his hand through 2 years of hell. The devoted future Luna who never wavered. I sat with my teeth clenched so hard my jaw ached. My colleague nudged me.
"Hey, rookie, go grab me a coffee."
I stood up and walked toward the side door. It swung open before I got there. Dominic walked through with Vivian on his arm and 2 bodyguards behind him. He was taller than I remembered. Broader. The years had carved him sharper, harder jaw, colder eyes, the kind of face that made rooms go quiet. Vivian saw me first. Her smile didn't move, but something behind her eyes went rigid. I stepped aside and lowered my head. Dominic's gaze passed over me like I was part of the furniture. No pause. No flicker. Of course not. He'd been blind the entire time I was with him. The silver toxin had ruined more than his sight, and Vivian's scent veil oil had covered my skin every day. He never saw my face. Never learned my real name. For 2 years, the woman who fed him, cleaned his wounds, held him through the worst nights of his life, that woman was Vivian. Not Aurora. I pressed my back to the wall and let them pass. His shoulder came within inches of mine, and for 1/2 second, barely a breath, his stride broke. Something rippled through the air. Low. Almost inaudible. Like a wolf stirring in its sleep. Then he kept walking. Vivian glanced back at me with eyes that said, "Don't." My wolf answered his. Quiet and desperate. Like a sound she'd been holding in for 3 years, finally leaking through the cracks. The interview began, and the host wasted no time.
Mrs. Blake, when Dominic was at his absolute lowest, blind, poisoned, abandoned by his own pack, how did the 2 of you survive that?
Vivian tilted her head, the picture of composure.
Some memories are just for the 2 of us. That's enough.
My pen snapped in my hand. That line was his. Dominic said it to me on a freezing night 3 years ago, when the toxin had flared and his wolf was thrashing inside him like a caged animal. There had been nothing I could do except press myself against his back and hold on until the worst of it passed. He had grabbed my wrist so hard it bruised. He whispered,
"Some things are just for us. That's enough."
Now Vivian had taken those words, polished them, and delivered them on camera with a gentle smile. The host sighed.
That's beautiful, but surely there must be one moment you can share with us. Something that made you realize he would survive?
Vivian's fingers brushed the ring on her hand. My ring.
There were many, but I remember the nights most.
The host asked.
The nights?
Vivian nodded.
The poison was worse after midnight. He would pretend he could handle it, but I could hear his breathing change. I used to sit beside him until morning, just so he wouldn't wake up alone.
That was mine too. Vivian had never been there for any of it.
Mr. Ashford, is that how you remember it?
The host turned to Dominic.
"I remember someone staying."
After a moment, he said. Then Dominic's eyes moved once and found me in the back row. My heart stopped. But he looked away almost immediately, as if I was nothing. 3 years earlier. My mother had just died. She left behind a pile of medical debt and a name so poisoned that no one in the Blake pack would even acknowledge me on the street. 20 years ago, the Blake elders on Vivian's mother's side had accused her of the worst thing you can accuse a she-wolf of, breaking her mate bond. She was expelled from the pack, stripped of protection, cut off from every resource, every connection, every friend she'd ever had. She spent the next 20 years in poverty so deep she sometimes couldn't afford heat in winter. She died in a charity hospital weighing 90 pounds, with 4 bruises running up both arms, still whispering that she was innocent. I couldn't afford the hospital bill. I couldn't afford a proper burial. I couldn't even afford a headstone with her name on it. That's when Vivian found me. I did not trust her enough to walk into that cafe unprotected, so I left my phone recording in my coat pocket. My glamorous half-sister, perched on a cafe chair with her designer bag and a cold smile.
50,000. Scent veil oil. It masks your smell with mine. Go pretend to be me and take care of my fiancé until he recovers.
Her fiancé was Dominic Ashford. Alpha heir. Poisoned. Blind. His wolf half dead. His pack circling like vultures.
A blind alpha with half a wolf? I'm not wasting time on that.
I took the money. But the first time I walked into his room and his broken wolf reached for mine through the fog of silver and pain, something deep in my chest cracked open and never closed again. Dominic was impossible to reach in those early weeks. Cold. Brutal. Locked behind walls so high no one could get close. He tested every person who came near him, pushing until they snapped or ran. Most of the staff lasted days before quitting. He thought I was Vivian, and he treated me like a woman fulfilling an obligation.
Stop pretending you care. I can hear it in your breathing. You're counting the minutes until you can leave.
I kept quiet. Took the insult. Did my job. Until the night I visited my mother's unmarked grave and came back late. Dominic was in the middle of a toxin flare. The pain had driven his wolf into a frenzy, and he'd torn the room apart, furniture overturned, the wall cracked where he'd punched it. When he heard the door, he turned on me.
You left.
His voice was raw.
You were going to leave me here alone. Just say it. Say you can't stand.
I kissed him. It was terrible. I had to stand on my toes and grab his shirt for balance, but his wolf, the one that had been screaming for weeks, went completely silent. I stepped back, breathing hard.
Feel that? Still think I'm disgusted by you?
His hands hovered at his sides. His ears turned red. That was my first kiss. My wolf made a sound I'd never heard from her before. He whispered my sister's name. But the bond that answered was mine.